What is up, guys? Everyone here, bringing you guys an update to my, not an update, but the first time I'm bringing you Blue Eyes Invoked deck profile. Now, Blue Eyes and Invoked, in my opinion, are two nice archetypes that could go together. I'm not 100% sure they can go together, but like a lot of people just mix them up. So I do have the two engines, and I decided to mix them up together. But one thing to note, this deck is really fun. But like a lot of other decks and a lot of other stories for decks, they got hit really hard during the Link era. Even though it's not the hardest thing in the world because you can't stand without one negator, but it just really hurt the deck consistency a little bit. So we are focused on only bringing one boss monster at a turn, and unfortunately, and maybe okay, let's just say I'm just English, just like Mark Z, is not my first language, so it's not like the best, but it is. I'm trying to do my best. But anyway, you're focusing on just bringing one boss monster that can negate your opponent's effect for the turn, and hopefully do your best. Unfortunately, again, this got hit during the Link format. But without further ado, let's see what this deck has to offer. So to start things off, it's pretty obvious. You want to run triple of your Blue Eyes White Dragons. I gone with the three favorite arts of mine, and I'm really happy that we got this art from the the Megatins. Unfortunately, the tablet is not one of my favorite ones, so I decided to go with this. Those are my three favorite ones that I have on me at the moment. So yeah, I decided to go with those. But anyway, free Blue Eyes White Dragon. Pretty obvious. Blue Eyes White Dragon is essentially your boss monster of the deck. Essentially open up your combos, and it's really important because of this guy, which is Blue Eyes Alternate White Dragon. Now, alternative, sorry, not alternate. Essentially, Blue Eyes Alternate White Dragon is essentially your, what do we call it? Your other copy of Blue Eyes, because he's counted as a Blue Eyes monster on Blue Eyes White Dragon on the field. His other effect is it must be special summoned by its own effect by revealing a Blue Eyes monster from your hand. Must be special summoned, cannot be special summoned by other ways. You must reveal Blue Eyes White Dragon monster from your hand, and then you special summon him 3,000 monster to board. And essentially, once per turn, he can destroy a monster on the field, but he cannot attack, unfortunately. And then to run off the dragons, I only run one Dragon Spirit of White and not two, unfortunately, because we don't have the place, and essentially, he's not the 100% focus of the deck anymore. Like, most of the time I just focus during the end phase if I'm going second to just bring two of this to just banish my opponent back row. But unfortunately, we don't have the place, and essentially, Invoked kind of help you go first in Blue Eyes, even though I think Blue Eyes most of the time is a deck that should go second. But Invoked, essentially, if you open up with them, is just help you going first in the deck. But essentially, that's it for your big dragons. Now we'll move on to the engines that help you. So to start things off, you want to run triple copies of Sage with Eyes of Blue, because it's making sense. Sage is essentially your searcher for all of your light level 1 tuners, which is really awesome, and he's also, when he's normal summon, of course, and he's also, you can discard him and target one effect monster on the field, send them both to the send it to the graveyard, and special summon a Blue Eyes White Dragon from your deck. So it's really awesome. Not Blue Eyes White Dragon, Blue Eyes monster. So it's really awesome. It's a really nice synergy, and it's gonna essentially just special summon a monster from your deck. Next up, one of my favorite tech cards with Alistair the Invoker is essentially Master with Eyes of Blue, which I most of the time like to send from my hand to the graveyard, because when this card is normal summoned, let's go through that first, he basically add you one of the level 1 light tuners that from your deck graveyard to your hand, and then when he's in the graveyard, you can just shuffle it into the deck, send one effect monster from the graveyard, and summon a special summon of Blue Eyes from your graveyard. So essentially, when I'm sending with Alistair, he's in the graveyard, activates effect, getting rid of another monster that, for example, in the extra monster zone, just to open for me the fusion, and then essentially also getting a Blue Eyes. So this is really awesome. And then we also run triple copies of the White Stone of Ancients, as well as the one White Stone of Legends. Essentially, if you a Blue Eyes player, you already should know what those card does, but this is essentially, if you don't really know, let's do it quick. He's, during the end phase, depending on, like, once per turn, you special summon a Blue Eyes from your deck during the end phase. So, yes, that's nice. And then in the graveyard, you can banish it and add a Blue Eyes card from your graveyard to your hand. But for the first effect, he must be in the graveyard. So, if you use the first effect, second effect, and he was sent to the graveyard this turn, you cannot use the first effect. So keep that in mind. And then the White Stone of Legends, because it on the graveyard, it search for you to a Blue Eyes White Dragon, which essentially really important. And then also we run double Galaxy Soldier. Now the reason why I run Galaxy Soldier, because this engine is essentially opening up for me Cyber Dragon Nova and Infinity plays, which I really like in the deck. Is essentially another layer of protection, as well, just really good. But I just running 2 and not 3 because I want to see this card, but not too much. Like in another Blue Eyes deck, in the original Blue Eyes deck that I have, I don't mind to see like 2 of this and then search for the third one. But in this deck particularly, I want to open up other combo pieces. So that's the reason why I decided to go with 2 Galaxy Soldier and not 3 of him. And then I also run 1 Effect Veiler. I know that it's out of hand, but you know, we're going to hand traps because Alistair I'm going to show you at the end. So 1 Effect Veiler because it's searchable by Sage with Eyes of Blue. And then 1 Maxi to essentially, it's the best hand trap in the game and it's pretty obvious. And then speaking of the obvious, if you run an Invoke deck, I run double copies of Alistair the Invoker. Now the reason why I run 2 Alistair the Invoker and not 3, because he's really good, but he does clog if you run too much of him. So essentially, I'd rather have like 2 of him, and then 2 Magical Meltdown to search him, because it's essentially the same number of cards without like running like 1 of this and 3 of him, but I do have the ability to essentially just search 2 with this 2 and essentially not clog like with 2, like opening up 1 with this, like okay, let's just say you open up 2 of this and then you have a third one and just you search the third one. I have the less chances to open up with Alistair the Invoker and still search him, so that's pretty much obvious. And then to run off the invoked engines that I have, I run 2 copies of Invocation and not 1 like some people do, for the sole purpose reason that this card is, well, is your fusion spell and it's really important. And 2, sometimes my opponent like to banish my cards from my hand when I like search them, or just like to banish them from the graveyard after I use them. So I want the second one for the sole idea that essentially if he banish 1, I'll still have the second one to use in another part of the deck. And that does it for your invoked engines. Now we'll move to the rest of the spells. So first off, 3 Melody of Awakening Dragons, because Melody of Awakening Dragons is essentially discard a card and just search for 2 dragons with 3,000 attack and 2,500 attack defense or less. Which is really good with Alistair if you open up like Alistair in Invocation and you just want to search with Sage. You can discard the Alistair, search with Sage, then get the Invocation Fusion if you want to, and just continue up from there, because sometimes you don't want to know some of the Alistair if you have your Sage. So this is really good for the sole purpose reason that it's essentially discard your Alistair to the graveyard, which is really nice. Next up, for your draw power, you want to run triple trade-in because it's obvious you have a lot of level 8s. Double card of Consonant. I'm still going with 2 cards of Consonant instead of like just cutting down to 1 or cutting down completely. For the sole idea that this card is essentially you have like 7 targets still in the deck with the 3 White Stone of Agents, the 1 Stone of Legends, and then 3 Sages to search them. So that's pretty obvious, and it's really good. So I really like this card. And then to run off the draw power, I run 1 copy of Spellbook of Knowledge, which, if you don't want it, you can just run like bump this card up to 2 and just run this card at 1, or just cut this card completely, run 2 of this and Spellbook of Secret, or just cut like this completely, run 2 of this and just Dragon Shrine, which I don't run, unfortunately, because I don't have the place in the deck. But 1 Spellbook of Knowledge because it really will help you, and sometimes it's okay to activate the Sage, even though I don't really like that. But that does it for your search card and your draw power. And now we'll move on to the revival spell. So first off, you want to run triple copies of Return to Dragon Lords, because it's essentially really important to the deck. 1 copy of Silver Cry, because I don't have the place in the deck, so that's why I decided to run this card at 1. Just like I decided to run didn't decide to run Dragon Trime and Galaxy Soldier. I run it just at 2 because this card again is really useful, but not that useful as a pure Blue Eyes deck. The more useful one is Soul Charge, but unfortunately we can't run more than 1 Soul Charge, even though it's pretty fair to just run 1 Soul Charge. And by itself, just as a card, it just, well, you could say this card is even unfair by 1. So I love this card, and it's really helpful during your, like, you want to try to establish boards, which is really awesome. So you want to run 1 copy of Soul Charge because it's revive your, like, let's just say you have your graveyard filled with boss monsters like Mekaba, Infinity, and Crystal Wing. You can just pay 3,000 life points, return all the 3 of them to the main monster zone, which is really awesome. And that's it for your revival spells. And for the last spell of the deck, I run 1 Mausoleum of White because I don't own an Ancient Fairy Dragon in my extra deck. If you own an Ancient Fairy Dragon, cut this card, add a Dragon Shrine, or just other spell or monster that you want. I just don't have a Ancient Fairy Dragon, even though this card is pretty good for the solo ideas that is essentially giving you another normal summon for level 1 light tuners. So it's pretty okay, I guess, and it's also just giving you this card to fill your graveyard with Blue Eyes, which I less do because I don't have Maiden in the main deck anymore, because, again, Invoked, I don't like to run Maiden in it. And that does it for your main deck. Now move on to the extra deck. First off, you want to run 2 of your Mekabas, which is the only Invoked Fusion I run because I only have Lights in the main deck. I mean, I have Max C, but the extra deck is already pretty tight. So 2 Mekabas, because it's really obvious, is essentially your negator by discarding a card with the same type. And I do recommend to you to run like traps in the side deck, so you can use like his effect to just negate traps. But I just don't going to show you side deck because this deck is essentially in testing. And like usual deck profiles of mine, when a deck is in testing, I'm not showing you the side deck. But that's pretty much it for the Invoked Fusions. You could run the others in the extra deck or just put whatever you want. I just decided to go with just 2 Mekabas, which are the 2 obvious you need. I'm going with 1 Blue Eyes Twin Burst Dragon, which you can cut for another Invoked Fusion. I just like this card at 1 because it's essentially just really good at clearing your opponent's like monster boards. It can attack twice and banish, and it cannot be destroyed with battle. And it's a contact fusion, so I really like it. And it has a synergy with Alistair because you can discard your Alistair from your hand and making this card 4,000 that can attack twice. So that's why I like this card a lot. Next up, you will run 2 Spirit because it's essentially really crucial for every Blue Eyes deck. It's pretty obvious as well. 2 Azure Eyes, which you can cut to 1 if you want to because it's less important, but I still really like this card at 2. And again, really obvious, it's protecting your dragons. You switch it during your opponent main phase, and essentially getting 2 protection until your end of your next turn, and essentially getting during your standby phases to revive normal dragon type monsters, which is awesome. Then 1 Crystal Wing and 1 Black Rose Moonlight Dragon. Essentially, if you have Ancient Fairy Dragon, put it instead and just take out the Beacon of White if you don't like it. Then we also run a Galaxy Engine, which is number 95, full armor, and Cypher Dragon. Pretty obvious, essentially steal your opponent monster, rank upon your Cypher Dragon, pop a card, or rank on your opponent like monsters that you stole, and then essentially number 95 to just banish card from your graveyard and you can attack twice. And then I also run for the 2 other XCs that I run is 1 Cyber Dragon Nova for the Galaxy Eyes, Galaxy Soldier, sorry, not Galaxy Eyes, which again I'm proxying because I'm waiting to the Legend Dragon decks because, well, we're probably going to get a reprint, and then 1 Cyber Dragon Infinity, which I already shown to you. I run this card at 1 because you put this on top of this. And again, something to note that you could do if your opponent like strike this. For example, this card is sent to the graveyard. I wouldn't say strike it, but when this card is sent to the graveyard, you can summon a machine fusion monster. And what's really good, Mekaba is a machine fusion monster. So if this card dies and you don't get your Infinity, it's too bad, but you can still live with this because you can get your Mekabas with, like, you know, Cyber Dragon Nova dies, you can get a Mekaba, so it's really awesome. And then Infinity, again, because it's really obvious. So I really like Cyber Dragon Nova in this build, and you should run this card at 1 and just, like, it's really save your butt. Sometimes if you don't get the Infinity, you still get the Fusion. So yeah, I just want to get that out of the way. And then to run off the extra deck, you want to run one Decon Talker, because essentially you want a Link monster. Sometimes it could happen that you want, like, you have the chance to get, like, it's not happened quite a lot, but it could happen that you can have the chance to have two, one Infinity, one Crystal Wing, one Mekaba, one Infinity, or just two Mekabas. It just essentially opening up your extra deck zones, your main monster zone to be extra deck zones. So that's pretty much does it to the extra deck. Pretty much does it to the deck profile as well. And that's it. Again, this is not one of my favorite, you can say, ideas for Blue Eyes, but if you really, really like it, you could pick it up. So, hope you guys enjoy. Don't forget to like, subscribe. It's really helped the channel. Unfortunately, this, again, like I'm saying, it's not one of my favorites. So, hope, and like, it got hit during the Link format. So, yeah, you could test it up, but I just recommend to just pick something else and to put your Invoked in, or just pick Blue Eyes by its own purity, because I believe pure Blue Eyes is a lot more better during the Link format. But yeah, if you want just to pick it up for fun, go right ahead. But yeah, that's it. Does it for the Invoked Blue Eyes deck profile. So don't forget to like, subscribe again, and I'll see you guys in the next video. And remember, the key in this game is creativity. Have a good day.